Hi, welcome everyone to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. Today we have Brooke Wheeldon Reece with us. Brooke Wheeldon Reece, MBA, is the president CEO of the Cypress Initiative, Inc., a three principles-based nonprofit organization. She's the co-author of the S.P.A.R.K, Speaking to the Potential, Ability, and Resilience Inside Kids mentoring curriculum, which is currently being taught to over 1,000 children in Tampa and around the world. Prior to her work with the Cypress Initiative, she was a national trainer for the Mendez Foundation's nationally recognized Too Good for Drugs and Violence prevention programs. She also spent time as a business consultant and curriculum developer for Verizon and Learning.com. Brooke knew she found her home with the Cypress Initiative after watching her husband come out of a deep depression with seemingly little effort. She now dedicates her work to creating sustainable change throughout all populations via mentoring, coaching, and teaching the principles. Brooke lives in Florida with her husband, Will, and their two daughters, Jayda and Gabriella. So Brooke, thank you so much for being with us, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. I am not used to hearing that whole thing read, but I appreciate it. I thought I'd start off by just kind of talking about the Cypress Initiative and what we do here, and then go into the topic today. But for those of you that don't know, the Cypress Initiative is a nonprofit, like Bonnie said, in Tampa, Florida, and it was born out of a request from Sid right around 2007, and it was actually started via Chip and Jan Chipman. So they helped start the Cypress Initiative in 2007. At first, we did a lot of work, and I say we, meaning the Cypress Initiative. I wasn't there at the time, but we did a lot of work in the prison system and with juvenile justice. And around 2010, they really saw a need for prevention education. So a lot of the people, if you've been around this conversation for a while, inevitably, either you've said or you've heard someone say, I wish I would have known about this earlier in my life. And when they were in the prison systems, that's exactly what they heard, right? They heard a lot of, if I had known this, maybe things would be different for me. I wouldn't be in this situation, that type of thing. So in 2010, they really shifted their focus from intervention in the prison system to prevention education. And they started to go into just a few schools in 2010 and teach this to kids that were at risk. And in Tampa, we have what's called an alternative school system. That can be different, I've learned, in different states and different countries. So sometimes an alternative school can be labeled where, I don't know, high achieving students go, but that's not the case here. The case in Florida, and especially in Tampa, is alternative schools are kids that have been kicked out of the mainstream school system for one reason or another. So that's where we started teaching our programs in 2010. When I came in 2014, I kind of accidentally fell into the principles, like most people that I hear. Wasn't really looking for anything, but my husband, as Bonnie mentioned, was going through a pretty bad depression. And I've always worked in nonprofit, and I've always worked in prevention education, and someone was telling a story about, or presenting to a bunch of nonprofit leaders, the Mandela Project. And just something that they said in that presentation really, I can't remember what it is now or what it was, but really struck me. And I thought, whatever they're talking about can help my husband. So whatever's going on with my husband, whatever they're talking about can help him. So I got really interested in what they were teaching. And also because I've always been in prevention education, it sounded like they were starting some sort of prevention education program in schools. So through my curiosity, I ended up at some trainings, and in 2014, long story that I won't bore you with, I came on board as the director of the Cypress Initiative. So since then, so when I came on board, they were already in a few schools doing some programming, and the schools teaching the principals to the students. So it wasn't a strategic plan of mine to go to the students first and teach them. And in fact, a lot of times through the first 2 years when we were just teaching the students, I kind of thought, man, we have got to get the adults on board. We need that buy-in from the adults for the students to really learn this. I had that same thought myself. And I think what I want to talk about today, and why I think it's an important topic for this kind of audience and for a 3PGC webinar, is I have heard, and Ashley is on the call too, and she works here at the Cypress Initiative. She works directly with the students, and I work mainly with the teachers and the adults. But I have heard time and time again from practitioners or the principals something along the lines of this. All the teachers have to have buy-in before I'll teach the students. I just want to work with the educators, because if the school doesn't have buy-in, then the students, it won't benefit the students. I won't work with the students unless the teachers and the administration have had training first. And that seems to be, it makes sense. I mean, I understand the reasons, but it seems to be a consensus in our community. And this past year, we had the opportunity for the first time to have the perfect scenario laid out for us. We were asked into a school and given funding. So the school came to us and we were given funding to do a top-down approach, just like we hear people saying. Teach the administration, teach the teachers, and it'll trickle down to the students. And logistically, that makes sense, right? If the educators get it, then the students will benefit. And that just makes sense. And what we have learned in the past year has been so, I think, beneficial to us, but also opened my eyes up to, if the Cypress Initiative's purpose, our core purpose, we do a lot of work with businesses and we do personal coaching, we work with adults, we work with community members, but our core purpose is to infiltrate the education system with the understanding of the principles. And when I say infiltrate, it means kind of like seep in. And if that's the core purpose, then that has to happen on kind of a bigger scale. So what we learned this year was truly such a good learning experience, and opened our eyes to how that could really happen on a bigger scale. And I will say, it might not be the case in every case, but I truly believe that it's through the students that this understanding will get into the school system. And the other reason we say school system is because that's where kids are, right? That's where they have to be. That's universal. Kids have to be in a school system of some sort. But I think it's really interesting, and I'll tell you some of the lessons we've learned, and Ashley can chime in too if she wants, but I think it's really interesting that in this community, you'll hear time and time again practitioners say, when someone comes across this understanding, one of the first questions is, well, this is great. How can I get my so-and-so to know this? Or my so-and-so, my husband, or my partner, or my child, or my coworker, or my boss. It would really benefit if they knew this. And the main answer that comes back is, well, no, you just need to understand this. And if you understand this, people around you will change. And I think it's really interesting and curious that we don't have that same mindset with children. And so what we've seen is that the same applies with kids. Once kids understand this, the people around them take notice. So my first year at the Cypress Initiative, we were in a middle school, and this is Ashley's first year too. We were in a middle school, and Ashley and some of the other mentors would come back and say, oh my gosh, this is not working. The teachers need to be trained. If we're going to come back, they have to be trained, because we're in the class and saying all of this stuff about their innate well-being and their innate health, and they have the answers. And you can hear the teacher next door screaming at the kids. And right away, I'm like, yeah, we have to train the teachers too. But what we saw was congruently what was happening in other classes where that was not a problem was the teachers would sit in the classroom while our mentors were teaching our programs to the kids. So in this school, the teacher wasn't sitting in. So we kind of came up with it's kind of like teacher buy-in doesn't have to be there. The teacher sit-in has to be there. So the teacher can be doing whatever they want while we're in the classroom, but they have to sit in. And that was the difference. And I think that's such a slight difference where we didn't even have any teacher in the school system sitting in the classrooms. They didn't know what the heck we were doing, versus teachers sitting in the classroom, grading papers, reading a book, whatever they do. They kind of get it. It seeps in almost. So that's kind of our model that we have for most classes. But the school we got to a chance to work with this year was very different. It was the top-down approach. So we had all of their professional development for the entire year was through the Cypress Initiative. So any professional development the teachers had was through us. We had planned out days. We had training days. They came to us. Perfect scenario, except for teachers are so inundated with programs, right? If you know anything about the education system, and some of you might, but if someone at the top says we're going to do this, then it just gets infiltrated down. So different programs every single year, and different trainings every single year. So what we found was there wasn't a yearning to learn for the teachers. It was I have to be here. And when you come in with that kind of mindset, it's really hard to hear something new. Not to mention, we're challenging everything that they know to be true, right? So they're told to be there, they're told to sit there, and then we're going to challenge everything they know to be true. And I don't know about you guys, but one of the things that I try to keep in mind is, for me, when I first learned this, there was kind of a foundation that shook, right? So if everything you know to be true is kind of up for grabs now, that's not all that lovely, unless you're really suffering. My husband was really suffering. To the point where he was hearing voices. To know that's not real, awesome, and a lot of freedom. If you're kind of living life and you think you're okay and you're not really searching for anything like the administrators and the teachers, and you have to be going through this program, it challenging and uncomfortable and really insecure. So what we saw was that seems to be really typical for teachers. So I've talked to several people in the community. Leila Turner did a program with teachers. Very hard. I've talked to Sandy Crott, and she said, out of all of my experience, teachers are the hardest audience to train. Kathy Casey told me a story about her and Amy doing the same project, and Amy was working with the kids and Kathy had to work with the teachers, and she ended up taking them to happy hour just to bond with them, because they are just up against so much. So when we sat back and looked at this year, the other part of our program that we were allowed to do was bring our program in to teach the students. So congruently, when we were teaching the teachers through the professional development days, I was doing that. We have mentors at the Cypress Initiative that teach our S.P.A.R.K program, which is just a principals mentoring program to the students. And so once a week, they would be in the classroom teaching the students. And at the end of the year, our goal was to have 10 teachers that were really bought in to be kind of carry the program forward. We have about, I would say 8. What do you think? 8, Ashley? And 2 things that we found very curious. One was the teachers that are really bought in were the same teachers that were sitting in the classroom week after week hearing our mentors teach the students. Even though the entire school got the training, those were the teachers that were impacted the most. And I really think it's because they didn't have anything. When I go to teach, or when I go to coach the teachers, so that's part of it too, we coach one-on-one. I'd say, how's the program going in your classroom, if they had it in the classroom? Oh yeah, great, the kids are really loving it, you know, it's wonderful, the kids are loving it. Okay, so how have you learned? You've been through all this professional development, have you learned anything? Oh no, but it's great for the kids, I really hope we do this again next year. Okay, so what do you think they're learning? And it's not until you ask those questions that the teachers are kind of go back, and this one teacher in particular is like, oh, you know what? As she tries to explain what they've learned, she recognizes what she's learned for herself. Oh, you know what? Last night I got really mad at my husband about the garage being dirty, and then all of a sudden I realized that that was my experience, and maybe he was having a totally different experience about the garage being dirty. And so what I find really curious about that was she sat in all of the professional development days, but it wasn't until her mind was relaxed enough to think that she wasn't really having to learn anything that something came in. And we found that time and time again with teachers. So I think the other reason that it's so effective, teacher buy-in, for teacher sit-in, I like to call it instead of teacher buy-in, is because you can argue something and it can be really uncomfortable, but just the same with me and my husband, when someone changes dramatically in front of your face, you can't argue with that. So as I'm teaching kind of to the class of teachers, saying this is how it works, them seeing it for themselves, seeing a student that they didn't think had innate resilience inside of them, seeing that student come alive, show up differently, seeing students, you know, walk away from a fight rather than take the next steps of the fight, seeing that happen right in front of them, there's no argument there. So there's no convincing, right? And it's really easy with educators because they're so busy to get into a convincing type of mood. I was recently reading Amy Mills' State of Mind in the Classroom book again, and the one line that stuck out to me, I read it when it came out in 2014, and now that I've been doing this work for a while, you know, when you just read stuff, you read it differently after a while. And the one line that just stuck out to me recently was right at the beginning of the book. It said, there was a quote from an administrator. It said, when push comes to shove, teachers will display the same behavior issues that they complain about with their students. And that's what shows up in educators training so much of the time. The same stuff they don't like about their students, they will display the same behaviors. The other reason I think it's important for us to start with the students is sometime last year, probably around May, I had someone asked me, you know, what's the purpose of the Cypress Initiative? And it was the first time I really didn't give like a stock answer. You know, our mission is to cultivate human potential, blah, blah, blah. And I really thought about it, and it just came to me. And I said, you know what I think the purpose is to work all of us, because there was someone in the three principals community, to work us all out of a job, to create a generation truly that doesn't have to have these conversations because it's not shocking or surprising to them. Because if you grow up knowing that the world works from the inside out, then there's no reason to talk about it. It's just something that is. And if it's something that is, you just show up to your life differently. So if it's just something that is, and a teacher gets really mad at you, or a parent gets really mad at you for something that you know you didn't do, right? You recognize, oh, they're just in there thinking, that's okay. I don't need to react to that. You just show up differently. If it's something that just is, as a student, you recognize when probably a good time to try to cram for a test and probably a bad time is. It's when it's something that just is, you don't try to be happy all the time, because it's okay to have all of the moods, the gamut of moods that you have. And if you're not trying to fulfill some sort of void or be happy all the time, then it makes a whole lot less sense to, for the students that we teach most, they're at the school because they have a sex crime, a violent crime, a drug or alcohol crime against them. All of those behaviors come out of trying to fulfill something. So if you understand that it's okay to not feel great 100% of the time, those type of things, to some level, to kids, don't make as much sense or don't happen as frequently. The other thing we do say here is there is a part of their brain that is not fully developed, and that's self-control, and we do keep that in mind. So sometimes they do have a little bit of self-control problems, but it's not because of a misunderstanding of where their feelings are coming from. It's not because of misunderstanding of, he did this and that made me mad, or she did that and that made me happy, so I have to be with her. It's just simply because self-control, right? Another thing that I think is really a reason for us as a community to maybe just question whether or not we're going to work with a school if the teachers have had training first or not. It's not only because the kids need it and the teachers can still learn if you're in their classroom, but also the value that this understanding adds to teachers that we've seen personally and to our education system is so important. So we know, especially in Florida, we have really good teachers leaving the field in droves. I mean, they're over it. They're burnt out. They are, they're tired. There's this whole new topic of trauma-informed care, and teachers and any kind of social workers are being asked to go through trauma-informed care training, and that's because of burnout. So they're citing the reason they're leaving is because of burnout, because of all the stuff the kids are going through, and they're tired. It's like compassion fatigue or something like that. And what we've seen is by being in the classroom, by teaching the students, that the teachers naturally are able to connect with their students more without trying, right? So it's not go to a training, learn about this new understanding, and then you can come back and have a better relationship with your kids. they're just hanging out in the classroom doing what they would naturally be doing anyway. And then they have a better relationship with their students. So I was going to tell a story, but I think Ashley would be great if you told the story about a teacher that's very, very young, younger than Ashley even, that was about to leave the classroom, and what happened with that.
I kind of had a feeling you were going to have me say it. It's okay. Yeah, I was in a classroom with a teacher who was going to, at the beginning of the year, she was extremely frustrated. She was used to getting the honors class kids, so the kids that are really wanting to make those straight A's and are on top of everything. She was used to that kind of dynamic, and then she got put into last year. She had to be with students who are not like that. They I forget what it was called, but she actually had to follow up and write reports and get parent stuff all the time. And it was a lot of the kids that were struggling and had behavior issues and things like that. So she was starting to have a really rough time when the school year first started. She had a lot of thinking about it because she knew that those kids were going to be the problem kids. That's, what she had thought. So we went into the school and I just sat in her classroom and did our lessons week after week. She sat there for the first few weeks just grading papers at her desk. She didn't think she needed to learn anything. She wasn't trying to challenge me with anything. She was just like, oh, good, this lady is coming in my classroom every week, and this is one day that I don't have to worry about anything. I can just grade my papers. So she would do that for the first few weeks, and then afterwards, we got about a month or so in, and she started piping up more and being involved in the lessons and wanting to answer the questions. And I think the kids started to see her differently because, when we're asking questions or when we're having discussions, it's very much a lot of stuff will come out of it that normally wouldn't. So she was saying stuff that the kids normally wouldn't even know about her. And so they were getting that connection with her without any of them even realizing it. And little did I know that she was actually planning on quitting that year, because before I came in, she was so frustrated and she was ready to quit. She was actually looking at other jobs. I mean, she had talked to her husband. At one point, she even shared with me that she wrote him this big, long letter because she was really wanting to do something else. This wasn't the career path. And so then it just shifted. We kept coming, and then she shared at the end of the year that she decided that she wasn't quitting. And the only reason why she felt like she actually enjoyed that past year and had a connection with her kids was because we were in there and she was seeing them through a different lens than she had seen them before. And so that just showed me, I didn't really think I was there for the kids. I wasn't there for the teacher. I was just there for the kids. And then I naturally had a relationship with her, and she naturally started seeing stuff for herself. She grew so much in that last year. It was amazing. And now she still has contact with us, and she still, says thank you because it was such a great program. And it wasn't because she was there to learn something. She was just sitting in and got it. And now I'm not in her classroom anymore, but I'm sure she's sharing the three principles in her own way in her classes to come, just because we were there before. So I think it's just really important because people think, which that was my mindset too at first, you want to have all the teachers involved. So you want everybody to know. When I'm hearing teachers screaming at students or, telling them they're dumb, and I want them to know about it because I'm like, you're the problem. But then seeing that, gosh, all it takes is just a teacher or two to be sitting in the classroom and listening. And then they're going to be the ones that go out into the school system. They're going to be the ones telling their friends. This particular teacher shared with other teachers about it. And so now we're in more classes this year at that high school just because what she shared with them about her own experience. So it's, I think we do a disservice knowing, just putting it out of our mind right away that, oh, they won't let us come in. They won't let us teach the teachers first. So I'm automatically saying no. With our approach, I just feel like we're able to get in however we can get in, and then it just naturally evolves and it naturally is able to trickle into the school system.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we found that I found just really interesting and opened my eyes was this school particular that we were working with this year. The principal has so much buy-in that through a series of events that I won't go into, but he happened to do a training with Roger Mills 20 some years ago in Miami and has just been living from this place ever since. He was not the principal at the time when we wrote the contract. So 2 days after we were asked to come into this school, the principals were transferred and he happened to be our principal. So crazy series of events, but talk about teacher buy-in. Like, we had administration buy-in, to the utmost that you could have. And still, with all of that buy-in, this is another thing. It was difficult to schedule trainings. So teachers have a lot of time issues, and because it's such a bureaucratic system, they can only be off this time. A lot of their time is scheduled for other things. And so to have a teacher training, it's really, talk about flexibility. You have to do it on their terms. And even when the administration has the buy-in, it was still really difficult to schedule. So when we did schedule it, it could only be from this time to this time. And we couldn't ask them to go off campus. So then you're on campus and then there's bells ringing. And so the whole idea of getting them off campus for 3 days so that they could really settle in and reflect the next day, that's just, for teachers, that's out of the picture. So we have to go back to the drawing board on how we can really affect educators, which I think is really important. Yeah, so does anyone have questions at this point? I feel like we've been talking for quite a while. Comments?
I'm just curious, do you go mostly into high school classes, or is it more elementary school, or are you covering the whole gamut?
Yeah, so that's a good question. This past year was our first year in elementary. Up until then, we'd only done middle and high school. But this alternative school that we worked with, they have, believe it or not, 2nd to 12th grade. So the only reason these students would be in this school is if they had, like I said, if they had a drug, alcohol, violent, or sex crime against them. And we have kids as young as 2nd grade. Yeah, so that was really surprising to us. And when we first took the school on, in our minds, we kind of said, we'll just do middle and high school. But then when you learn that kind of thing, you say, no, we're doing the little ones. They need it. And the other thing that I think we've learned a lot is this year is it's often said in our community that kids get it so quickly, and it takes adults a lot longer to weed through all of their thinking. And what we've seen is really with the younger ones, the younger, like the elementary school kids, it makes so much sense why they understand it so quickly, but because they're just living in the present so much more of the time than we typically are as adults. They're not planning on how to get their kids to school. They have someone to do that for them, right? Or they're not planning on, they're not planning anything. They're not typically thinking about what happened in the past. So they're just so much more present naturally. And so when you're talking about teaching students versus teaching teachers, that's when you learn when anyone learns, the best is when they're present, when they have more space in their head. So it's another reason why kids get it so quickly. And why, if a teacher's just sitting in the classroom listening, they're bound to get more than or faster than if they're made to go to a training. And that's the other thing I think is important to note is a lot of times in businesses or in different trainings, in this understanding is people are often looking for something. So they sign up for something knowing what they're getting. And with teachers, they just don't have that ability in any of their professional development. So it's kind of an insight. Nine times out of 10, they don't have any decision-making ability when it comes to that. The district will say, this is what you're doing. So it's much different than you yourself, coming on this webinar because you want to hear what someone else has to say. That just doesn't happen in the education world. Very, very rarely does a teacher or an educator get to say, oh, that looks interesting. I wonder if I could get my school district to pay for that. That's not their professional development. So they just come into it with a different mindset. Anyone else have questions?
So just curious, do you have a lot of much interaction with the parents of the kids going through the program? Do you get feedback from them? Do they become interested and seek out training or?
So to be honest with you, when I first came on in 2014, a big thing that I saw would be beneficial is if the parents got involved, right? Or if they asked questions or they understood. And I hate to say it, but it's almost because of I will say the clientele that we work with, that their parents are not necessarily disengaged, but busy. So a lot of times it's single family homes, or it's foster care kids, or they're in some sort of system already. And so parent engagement, even though it's offered at conference nights or because we go into the school system at a lot of different levels, it just doesn't happen. I mean, we could put on full meals at conference night, invite all the parents, and we'll get to, maybe. Yeah. Typically when something has caught their attention, it would be more our after school programs where the parents are involved in taking them to the program, or summer programs, those situations where the parents are actively involved in knowing what the kid's going to, which we do have. Parents do get engaged and start to ask questions. But in the school setting, I think it just gets lost in the mix. And I can see that too, because I work full time. I have 2 daughters in school, and it's got to be right smack in front of my face for me to see what's happening. There have been times where students have made huge turnarounds, and then we get calls at our office like, what's going on? But that's through, a series of, they called the school. The school actually identified what was going on and then got in touch with us. The other thing I was going to mention, I forgot, but what sometimes happens, which I think is really neat in our classes, is teachers will start talking to each other. And then when teachers are on breaks, they'll come and sit in when we have classes for the students. So a lot of times there's like groups of them that will come and sit in during the classes while the mentors are teaching the kids, because the teachers are getting something out of it too.
Yeah, we had one school that had at one point there would be about 5 teachers all just coming in. As soon as I would go to start, they would just trickle in because it happened to line up with their breaks, and so they would just sit right in there and just watch me do the class. And then that's one of the schools that is wonderful with us. I mean, they're really flexible with how we can schedule. They're really they're just really in it because they have so many teachers now that just have kind of gravitated towards the program just by sitting there.
Yeah, I think if I had to summarize this call, that's what it would be about is I hate to see there's so much potential in teaching children this understanding. And I hate to see people stop at the first no or stop at the first roadblock. And oftentimes the biggest roadblock is professional development for a variety of reasons. And there's just so many out of the box ways that it can work. Flexibility is hands down the key to bringing this into education.
Yeah, I was gonna say we have 22 classes this year that we go into, and if we required teacher buy-in for every single one of those classes, we would not be in nearly any as much as we're in. I mean, it's great when we're at schools where, you know, they are, but it's just getting in there. That's like the big thing is once you can get in there, it's just it's naturally, organically just gonna fall into place. But yeah, if we had that mindset of we cannot go into this school unless we can go to administration first, I would have had to stop on almost all the schools that I've gone into to get the program. I would have had to stop right at the front door because it just logistically wouldn't work out.
It's also, you know, I think it's a good point to make that we're in a private school where the teachers are and the students are just good kids, right? They just have learning disabilities. So the two private schools that we work in, the kids have learning disabilities. It's a far different mentality for the teachers in that school versus the alternative schools. And I think that has a lot to do with when you're staking a claim, like we're staking, it's not your outside circumstances. It's coming from the inside. When you're staking that claim with kids that have so much against them on the outside, there are so many circumstances in these alternative schools that these kids have to deal with. To say that to an educator who's with those students day in and day out, where they know the personal stories with their parents, or, you know, the dad's drinking and comes home and beats the kid up, or they're in foster care and this is their 15th home, or this kid has 7 felonies against them, or, you know, and we come in and we say boldly, it's not the outside circumstances, it's coming from the inside. It's really easy for any kind of caretaker that sees that day in and day out to dismiss what you're saying. Mm-hmm. So which is just another reason why going in and working with the students themselves and the student changes in front of their eyes, they can't dismiss that. Ron, you can unmute yourself, I think. Oh, I can't hear him. I can't hear you. We can't hear you. You could type in.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm
Hi,
in South
Karen.
Africa.
Hi.
I'm a learning support teacher, and I heard about this from a friend of mine who's come from South Africa to do the course in America. So I'm very new to all of this. I'm just very interested to see how things operate in your country. Pretty much similar things on our side. We also have teachers that need help and professional development, but it's a time thing. They're exhausted, so I like the idea of coming in via the children. I think that's fantastic. So yeah, I'm just learning a lot listening to you, and I'm hoping that we can introduce it to South Africa somehow. And yeah, I haven't done the training or anything. This is completely, I've just heard about it because she asked me to be her case study or whatever for her training.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so I'm just listening in and gathering lots of information.
Oh, welcome. Welcome.
You.
If you ever have questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Thanks. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's, that's such a good good point that she made is they're exhausted. Teachers are tired. They have I've been in education for so long that I've kind of got to know all of the requirements, at least in the States, but I think it's pretty much universal that teachers have to do. And their day ends, at whatever time school ends. But my sister-in-law's in education, their day never ends. So to ask them to buy into something that isn't actually a part of whatever's coming from the top down, whatever's like boxes they have to check, that's a big ask. Even in a business, if a business brings something in, you can kind of see like, okay, this has to do with my job because of XYZ, but this kind of training doesn't fit into any of the boxes for grades or outcomes or any, like, it doesn't naturally fit in there. It does once you understand it, but at the surface level, it doesn't. And so to ask them to take that on too, even though we know that if they truly understood, it would make everything else a lot easier. It would make everything a lot easier. It's just a big ask because they are tired and they're exhausted and they have a lot on their plate.
I also was thinking, what about during the time while they're being educated? What about having this brought into their teacher training before they go into the classrooms? As part of their education. I mean, what are the chances of getting it at that level?
Yeah, I love that idea. We're actually working with a technical college here close to us, and they have, it's not necessarily what you're talking about, but they have certification for younger grades and just having a curriculum that they have to go through for that. The other thing is we donate our classes, our S.P.A.R.K program, to 2 to 3 schools a year. And one of the schools that we consistently donate to, we donate to a class of future teachers for that reason. So this high school is they're high achievers, and this class is designated to these students that are it's called like the Urban Teachers Association or something, and they're training to be teachers. So we teach this to them every year and donate that just for that reason. I mean, wouldn't that be perfect? I love that idea.
Brooke, I don't know if you can see the chat box, but Ron typed in a question. What are some of the reasons a 3P practitioner needs to teach the S.P.A.R.K?
Needs to. Your life depends on no. I don't think you need to, but I think it's if you're interested in getting this into schools, into education system, because of the S.P.A.R.K program, for anyone that listens to this that doesn't know, is just how did someone describe it today? It's an interactive virtual mentoring program. So anyone that purchases it or uses it, or any district, it's all online and it's a platform. But the reason I think that for a 3P practitioner that's interested in getting into education, it's useful. And I'll have Ashley talk a little bit about this because she's the one that goes to schools and says, this is what we have, would you like it? It speaks the education language. Whereas one of the biggest things that I hear 3P practitioners say is, well, how do I approach a school? I mean, this is with anything, right? When you start to come across this understanding, your first question is, how do I explain this? So what the S.P.A.R.K program does is it just breaks it down into the educator's language. I was just having a coaching call earlier where I was saying the same thing. Person was applying for a job within a school district, and I said, forget 3 Ps, forget that. Don't start with that. Speak their language and whatever you think can help them, right? So what I would say to any school is, would you like your teachers to be more connected to the students? Would you like the students to feel more connected to the teachers? What if we could show you how resilience is already there and there's nothing you have to teach them to get resilience? What if it's just natural? Those kind of things educators really lean into. Or decision making. How would you like your students to make better decisions? Everybody, right? Ashley, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, with the S.P.A.R.K program, since it is such a, when I go into the schools to approach them to get the program into there, when you just come in and because yes, I want to be in the moment. I want to show up to what shows up. I want to, but that language doesn't do well whenever I'm going to see an administrator, because they want to see something. They're used to curriculum and they're used to, so with the S.P.A.R.K curriculum, you're still able to show up in the classroom to what you want, but it was so much easier for me when I would go in and approach schools to have this curriculum in my hand that speaks their language and show them. And honestly, if I could get a meeting with them and just show them, they're like, oh, they know what they're doing. And then, it has the stuff that they want to see. It has the bullying in there. It has the, the anxiety and all the stuff that they're dealing with their students that they want in the school. It has that right on the table of content. So then they see this big book and they're all excited, like, oh, yay. And it just makes it easier for a practitioner to be able to get into the school and then show up and do, what you do.
I think it just goes back to administrators and educators are so busy that if you come with a complete program and they can see they're not going to have to do anything, and then you show up when this sounds so simple, but it's so true in education. You actually show up when you're supposed to show up, and your heart is there for the kids, and your intention is to be of service to their school, then it's a no-brainer. And you don't have to explain the principles to anybody. Anyone else? I have no idea what time it is. How's it doing on time?
Well, this was really interesting to me. I knew that you worked, I knew some about your work, but I really hadn't, not being in education, I really had never looked into the work that you're doing. And I really appreciate your coming on and doing this webinar. Thank you so much. And what a pleasure, and that we got 2 for 1 today.
Yeah.
As well as you. Thank you, Ashley.
No problem.
So do you want to say anything to wrap it up?
Ashley, do you have anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I just thank everybody for being on here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. If you have any questions, we're always available to chat one-on-one or just reach out to us. All of our information, I guess I should say that, can be found on the Cypress Initiative, or it's www.cypressinitiative.org.
And I'll have it when this is posted on YouTube. There's a section underneath, and I'll have your website underneath there so people can contact you. Well,
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again, and just want to let everybody know that the next webinar is on April 27th with Wynn Morgan. So hope to see you then. Okay, well, bye everyone.
Thank you all.